My name is John McKeon, and I'm the moderator of the Teradata Aprimo River community, Teradata and Aprimo's largest customer community. You can connect with us at teradataRiver2.com. Today, we'd like to welcome Becky Wanta, Senior Vice President, Global Chief Technology and Innovation Officer at MGM Resorts International. Becky is speaking at this year's Partners Conference on data discovery enables the front line to make better decisions and, in fact, the best decisions possible. Becky, welcome to the River.
Thank you, John.
Becky, you are speaking at Partners Conference, and it's a really interesting subject. There's all kinds of benefits around what you did at MGM. First of all, at the end of the day, it really comes down to customer experience. What data things that you did that actually enabled a better customer experience?
Well, John, the first thing we had to do was lay down the right technology architecture, which involved having the right integration tier and then the right, what I would call the information management central compendium, which means all the information that we need in the moment, after the fact, and from a history perspective to actually manage that customer experience that you just so aptly stated, because at the end of the day, that is our main focus.
So, but what happens, Becky? I mean, your business is not a straight line, linear thing. You have resources, people working, you have big days or big weekends like Fight Weekend or Super Bowl. How do you manage those resources with better data?
I think you hit on it. I mean, you're right. It was a big challenge for us because if you look at our company, you know, we're not one particular industry. We're about 7 industries in one. So I look at all those industries as channels of where information is happening, where everybody's on the big bandwagon about the big data dilemma. And I've said it before, big data is not my issue. Meaningful information is my concern. And so how do you coalesce that information in the moment to make the right decisions? And I know we'll talk in a moment about point to example where we've accomplished that. But by and large, the bigger issue is what is it about all the transactions that are happening through all these channels that I care about while I've got that customer, say, on-premise, planning to visit us, or on their way back to their domicile. And that's, at the end of the day, what we're really going to talk about, that I think most companies today are really struggling with. And I feel like with our company, we're all over it, and it centers on knowing about the customer and what we really do with it. And, John, just as I mentioned to you before, our customers visit us 1.2 or 1.3 times a year, and so we don't necessarily focus only on the local environment. We focus on all the customers, and most of them are traveling in because, as you know, our mantra is escapism, right? People come to Las Vegas to escape, to build their own wow, to build their own experience. And if we don't know all the information that they care about that's relevant to them, so it's kind of mass customization on a niche of one, you cannot do that if you cannot address getting that data into meaningful information that you can decision and manage in the moment. That's our goal, that's our objective, and that's what we've been working towards. And it's different for everybody because what I want out of my experience, say, coming to Vegas, is going to be different than what you may want out of it. But both of our wants are foremost to us.
Becky, you've got the biggest challenge of all. These people are real time. They want their drink. They want their food. You've got variables of the right servers. You got them working hard. How do you actually take the data and work in a real-time environment like this?
So when I said we put the right technology architecture in place, we leveraged not only Teradata for the real-time central information compendium, but we used the Spotfire product to be a real-time analytics visualization tool. So we could set up different measurements in the moment, and it's colorized, right? So we can see things like services effectivity. We can participate and anticipate on big weekends what that demand's going to be. And I've got Bob on the call with me too, and Bob was vital working in partnership with me, working with our customer to help pull out with our customer base the kinds of different questions they would want to ask and answer to drive that customer experience. So I don't know, Bob, if you want to say a couple of words about what we did when we put this real-time dashboard in place, measuring customer experience and measuring server productivity as an example, as just 2 objectives.
Certainly. Hi, Bob Moore from Spotfire here, and I worked with Becky on this project. And basically a number of different things. Once the technology was in place, the speed at which the questions could be asked and answered was very significant. For example, along the lines of operational efficiency, when they were looking for staffing on overtime, There were a couple of different instances where the overtime lists were generated, and working off of those, we were able to see instantly, visually, where the folks were getting overtime versus those folks who weren't. Once the schedules were adjusted, it was both a benefit to the employee as well as a benefit from an operational and cost standpoint for the company.
Just on that point, what Bob just mentioned, let's take it one step farther. So in the case of not only server effectivity, but even in the overtime management side of this, we had staff that was feeling like they were being ground to the bare minimum, being that they were the ones working all the overtime. We had others that weren't necessarily having to work as much overtime, so it enabled us as a leadership team to look at and say, how do we better load level? Because our human capital to us is one of our most important assets. We don't want to burn people out. But by the same token, we have high standards in terms of how we want that guest experience to translate.
Okay.
And so it enabled us to basically better balance how we were going to distribute the overtime. And obviously our happy service providers make our customers happy, and that's important to us too. And that's not something that we could see, but we could certainly see within the overtime how that was being used and how it was repeated, who was working all those kinds of hours. And just as Bob said, when some people are so close on overtime and others are not, you have a better chance of load balancing that, so you're not paying the double time when in fact others could use the hours, and it makes for a much more satisfied workforce. So that was important to us. I think the other thing that's worth noting here is once we had that kind of information, not just about the overtime, but in the real time, like Bob just mentioned, we could see, if we were running different campaigns, for example, say had a different set of wines in our different restaurants, or we were watching different restaurants' performances, and we could see certain line items that weren't moving as effective in all of our properties as they were in others. Those represented training opportunities for us to have a much richer conversation with our staff and say, hey, are you understanding this particular wine or this particular main entree? And it enabled us to push different restaurants along different lines. They had much more real-time information on how their restaurant was performing in the moment. And prior to us doing this, just so I can level set for everybody else, prior to us doing this, we would look at data, but it was already 90 days old by the time we were running these kinds of analytics on it. Now we're doing it real time. Now in a heat map, we can see things like the different volumes, the flattening of the curve. Like when you see a Super Bowl weekend as an example, we looked at the data, we could see patterns and trends, but now we can anticipate so that's a much richer experience to our customers because we can make sure we've got the right flow through of inventory and servers handling in the moment to make that the richest experience possible for our customer base, which before that we had not the benefit to be able to do.
Becky Wanta, Global Chief Technology and Innovation Officer at MGM Resorts International, speaking at Partners Conference. Should be a very interesting talk, talking about using data to enable the front line for best decisions possible and ultimately the best customer experience possible. Becky and Bob, thank you. We look forward to seeing you, Becky, at Partners.
Thank you, John. Bob, thank you too.